Rosie, a graphic designer and general creative based in LA, and this is Design Sandbox. Today I'm going to be talking about risograph printing, being a deliberate student, and the wonders of growing rainbow chard. In the past year, I moved into a new place and inherited a very beautiful little gardening box. I grew up with a mom who was literally a certified master gardener, and it never really called to me growing up, to be honest. I had been getting the itch to get my hands in the soil recently. The past few summers, the garden had definitely grown on me, and I helped my mom with some of the work. It was nice to do some light physical labor in nature, and I unsurprisingly love the aspect of harvesting fresh produce. So it was very exciting when I finally had the opportunity to grow a little garden of my own, especially in the optimal farming climate that is Southern California. I think at the root of it, I wanted something that I could put my energy into, experiment and learn from, and really yield something for my efforts. So in September, I began my garden. Then in January, I started something I'd been really dying to start up. I signed up for print classes, specifically a 4-week, 16-hour risograph printing intensive. To say this was something exciting for me is definitely an understatement, though I never used a risograph machine. The style has hugely inspired so much of my design work. I've been obsessed with the style for a long time. I grossly overuse my risograph effect plugin on Photoshop for any project. I just love the grainy textures and the way the transparencies kind of interact with each other. Taking on these new things at the beginning of the year, gardening and print classes, I couldn't stop thinking about how these two acts felt so connected and what they were both actually trying to teach me. So for some background on risograph printing, a risograph is a stencil duplicator essentially. It was made in the 80s for cheap, high volume printing, but it had kind of varied effects in terms of qualities. So then artists and indie publishers eventually got hold of them and realized what made them bad at their original job is actually what made them pretty interesting, and then they could also print high volume media at a low cost. Today, it's having a real renaissance, I would say, especially in zine culture and independent publishing, and it's become a favorite medium for a lot of artists and designers. It prints one color at a time using soy-based, and the ink sits on top of the paper rather than soaking in. Colors are limited to specific spot inks, and when you layer them, the overlaps do something that you can kind of predict, not totally control. The registration is always a little off, things grain and bleed and glow in a way that just feels really homemade and makes for a beautiful print. So when I found a 4-week intensive, I signed up. I wanted to be in a room with the actual machine, learning, experimenting, and just kind of making stuff. I wanted to walk in not knowing what I was doing and have someone show me. The class quickly became an amazing way for me to start my 2026. It was at the studio Punch Kiss Press in LA, taught by the amazing Karina, shout out, who runs the whole operation. The first week was purely about getting acquainted. We each brought in a simple 2-color design, and she walked us through how the machine actually works. How you separate your artwork into individual color layers, how the drum works, how ink density behaves, why paper weight matters. It's a lot more involved than it initially looks, and the machine has a real learning curve to it, and personality to match. Shout out to our machine, which was named Valentine. Love you, girl. Week 2 was a zine, and it was our turn to use the machine. Our teacher basically stepped back and let us run the machine ourselves while she watched, only stepping in if we were really not about to do something right. A little stressful, but it was a great way to build confidence. You learn so much faster when you're the one making the decisions, especially the wrong ones. Then weeks 3 and 4 were devoted to a final project, totally open-ended. Zine, poster, notepad, calendar, whatever you wanted, whatever concept you wanted to do. Looking back, there's a thread running through everything I made. Seasonality, growth, becoming. Didn't plan it that way, it just kind of kept showing up, especially as I look back on it now. So for the first class, I pulled an old design I'd just been sitting on, something I'd made while I was reading Clarice Lispector. If you haven't heard of her, she's this Brazilian writer, completely unhinged and deeply human, kind of existential surrealism. that I find really captivating. The piece I made had a butterfly with eyes and hands, kind of a moody ocean in the background, and then this vintage embellishment overlay on top. All of it was kind of trying to capture that feeling her writing gives you. How I looked at it, it was a design in honor of Becomings, which felt like a root theme from the books I've read of hers. I'd always thought that would look good in Riso, so thought it'd be a fun starting point. For the zine, my garden found its way in, specifically my rainbow chard plant, which was in season and producing in mass amounts. Like seriously, if you ever want to grow rainbow chard, it will keep growing even if you light it on fire. Like, I was like, wow, planting during the season really does matter because that won't stop growing. I'd gone to the farmer's market the week before with a friend and gotten this idea for a pocket guide to Southern California's seasonal produce. Something small enough you could just throw in your tote that you could actually reference while you're shopping. I leaned into kind of an earthy palette, brown, and this really vibrant light green that I loved a lot, with a kind of 70s storybook energy. Exaggerated type, vintage produce illustrations, old embellishment elements. It was really fun to design and also to research. I learned a lot about what's actually in season when around here. Printing it was exciting, and even folding 30 copies of the thing by hand wasn't that bad. There was something really satisfying about ending up with a big stack of them to just hand out to friends. Not dissimilar to my mass amounts of rainbow chard, which I was also kind of just giving away to friends, making do whatever I could. It's nice to produce something and then be able to share it. The final project was definitely the most intimidating. 2 full weeks. It was a completely open brief, 20 something available ink colors to choose from. I definitely had some decision paralysis. When there are truly no constraints, ideas just kind of pile up and cancel each other out. What eventually pulled me through was going back and thinking about what I liked about making the zine. It was something tactile and useful, something I could actually give to people. So I landed on little mini calendars. So I went into Photoshop and I started playing. I brought back the embellishment style from the zine with that exaggerated first letter for each month. And then the borders I pulled in from a public domain quilt design I found online. Each month kind of got their own. Then I started sourcing photographs and experimenting with color overlaps in a way that I hadn't yet. I'd isolate a subject from the image or pull out some element that just kind of felt right to emphasize, and then I let the Riso colors do the rest and see how it worked out. For ink, I ended up going with cornflower blue and brown, which I really loved. The brown was kind of a good warm grounded base, and then the blue made everything pop. And that's just a colorway that I've really loved the past year or so. In the end, I printed on 3 A3 sheets per set, each carrying 4 months over the course of those 2 weeks. I bought these little bulldog clips to bind them, and I even learned how to use the laser cutter to trim them down, which was definitely a little intimidating at first, but then kind of addictive and a little bit powerful even. And I assembled my 30 mini calendars. It was so rewarding to finish the class and the projects, and it didn't take long to understand why these two things had called to me at the same moment. At the time, I'd moved to a new place and I was adjusting to a new job. Somewhere in all that, I'd hit a creative dry spell. It was nothing dramatic, just flat kind of. I was trying to create through sheer will, and it wasn't really working. What the garden and the print class both gave me was a situation where I wasn't in charge. In the garden, you prepare, you tend, and nature does what it will do. With the Riso machine, you bring your artwork, you make your choices, and then the machine weighs in. There's a teacher in both of them that isn't you. And I definitely needed that, something physical that I could give my hands to, something I could produce and share, and something that did the teaching so I didn't have to generate it all from within inside myself. Kind of how you see today about people doing personal syllabuses, which is awesome and so cool. But sometimes you need that outside thing to draw you out and inspire you and push you forward. I found the more I showed up and did the work, the more inspiration I grew from it. It really compounds. And sometimes you need that outside force to give that ignition. And that's something I keep coming back to, which is just how good it felt to do something purely for doing it. No deliverable, no client, no metric, just kind of show up, pay attention, and get better slowly. It's definitely become a really real value for me this year, finding the worth in the process itself rather than rushing and just seeing what you can have show for it. And this can be hard because it means sitting with being bad at something for a while, printing something that doesn't work and then learning from that, having a plant dying and you have to figure out why. The thing that makes it work is fully accepting the role of novice, not reluctantly, but genuinely, actually curious, actually willing to be taught. And I've really fallen in love with this lately, being a deliberate student, something you choose for yourself and you actually commit to, with both full surrender and full responsibility at the same time. And the opportunities for it are everywhere in a lot more forms than you might expect. Sometimes it is an obvious kind, like a class with a curriculum and an instructor, something social and physical that pulls you out of your normal routine. That structure can be so valuable. Having an external teacher means you're not trying to generate inspiration from nothing. There's already a container, already a logic to follow. You kind of just have to show up and be willing. But it also doesn't have to be that formal. My garden definitely had no instructor. Besides my mom, when I would text her, I love you. Nobody assigned me readings on companion planting or showed me how to read the soil. The garden just did what it did, and I had to learn to pay attention and then also do my own research. Other examples, if you want to learn surfing, the ocean can teach you in that same way, if you're willing to get humbled by it on a regular basis. What matters isn't the format, it's the posture. Are you actually in it to learn, or are you just going through the motions? Are you willing to be the least experienced person in the room or in the water, the studio, and then let that be okay, genuinely? Because what I've noticed, when you genuinely surrender to something that's bigger than your current understanding of it, something will shift. You stop performing and you start receiving. You stop trying to already know and start actually finding out. And in that state, when you're out of your depth in the best way, you come back to yourself differently, more curious, a little more patient, definitely with a lot more inspiration. And that's what the garden gave me. That's what the Riso machine gave me. Not just rainbow chard and calendars, those were great, but a reminder that the world is still full of things I don't know yet, and that not knowing is actually the most interesting place to start. So my advice is go find something to be bad at and let it teach you. Maybe you'll come home a little different than when you left. And to end out this video with my aforementioned girl, Clarice Lispector, this quote is from her book, An Apprenticeship, or The Book of Pleasures, and I think it pretty perfectly wraps up the whole idea of what I've been getting at. Not understanding was so vast that it went beyond any understanding. Understanding was always limited, but not understanding had no frontiers and led to the infinite, to God. See you next time.